Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the Comms Council Zoom update. We're into week 5 now, week 5, level 3. And with us on the panel this afternoon, we've got Nick Vile from O Media, and we've got me, and we've got Nick Beecham from Thick as Thieves joining us. Hi, Nick. Jody from TVNZ. Hi, Jody.
Hey.
We've got Amy from Augusto. We've got Nigel Douglas there from OMD. We've got Paul Head from the Comms Council and Damon Stapleton from DDB. So welcome along, guys. Thanks for taking time out. So yeah, week 5. I guess it feels like we've been stuck in this bubble forever. 5 weeks feels like a long time. But as we've moved to level 3, I guess like some of the interesting things like the way that we're working and getting ready to come into level 2. Seems to be changing the way we were working. Well, I think it is. Has anyone got any different about how we're working in the last week or so?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, it's funny, when we first started this, it was kind of summer and we all had great haircuts, and now we're 5 or 6 weeks in and it's winter. And we're all looking a little bit woollier.
What's wrong with my haircut, Jody?
But,
have you dived into the supermarket colour box, Jody?
No, this is natural, buddy. This is natural.
I'm going for late 80s magician. Sort of Siegfried and Roy.
In fairness, Damon, your hairstyle always looks like you've been in lockdown. So
so does yours, Peter.
Where's your hat and your wand?
What I was going to say, Peter, was that I think in the early days, we kind of had a view of level 2 would all be back at work and it would be fine again. But I think as we're getting closer to it, the realization is happening that no matter what gets announced next week, level 2 is not returned to normal. And, certainly from our perspective, what we thought level 2 return would look like a month ago is quite different now. So, level 2 will still be only 50% of the teams in the offices, staggered start times, staggered end times, trying to understand how people can catch public transport on level 2 to get people into the office. It's kind of just those ongoing challenges. So it's a bit of a moving feast, to be honest, I think, whereas I thought would be a bit more locked down, students with what level 2 looked like.
Yeah.
And you're right.
What's everyone hearing about level 2 and how long we think it's going to last for?
No idea.
No idea.
No,
I don't think
all those bits are off. Yeah.
I don't think it'll be 2 weeks.
I think level two is medium term. I think level 2 will have at its heart social distancing still, and we're going to have that for some time. It'll be months, I think, before we get back to level 1.
I think the interesting thing also is going back to the agency, but also when you start to make work again. You've got all these multiple timelines. You've got level 3, level 2, level 1. Are you going to make work that has social distancing involved, or do you go back to normal? And, I think that's going to be really interesting, the kind of work we'll be making.
Well, actually, we've got Nick Beecham here and from Thick as Thieves. Nick, you want to talk about perhaps going to level 2? What's that going to mean for the film industry in terms of what will we actually be able to do?
Yeah, well, we've been doing a lot of work on this at the NZ APG, which is our producer group, which is most of the film companies. And I'm the vice chair, and myself and in particular, Bex Kelly, have been doing a lot of work with the screen industry group, trying to develop new safety and health and safety protocols to move ahead with, so we can actually physically get back to what we love doing, which is shooting. But it will be a little bit different for a while, and obviously we've been on an enforced hiatus for 5 weeks, which has been pretty surreal, and it's been sort of wonderful on one level, but it's terrifying on another. But I think with level 3, between level 3 level 2 is going to allow for some pretty controlled shooting. It's not going to be full freedom, but we can get back to doing a lot of what we were doing before.
Right.
There's just going to be a lot more, some fairly robust processes and steps involved before we can hit the green light on anything. It's going to be a lot more vigilance and a lot more process around it. But I would like to think, level 2 that we can be shooting stuff for you guys sooner than later. That's certainly our aim. We're all about exit strategy, which is getting ready to go, having the best practice. We've redone all our documentation, all our health and safety, our terms and conditions, so that we can move really quickly and that everyone's very educated and has the right paperwork. And we can start educating you guys. We're talking to the agency producers about what kind of compliance we're going to need and what all of those layers and what's that starting to look like. And it is quite complicated. But
Nick,
I feel like we've done a lot of work on it, and we're in a good place, particularly Bex and the safety team have done exceptional work. And so I think we want to come screaming out the gate as soon as possible, but we will, gingerly, Yeah.
I think
that's kind of that's my question. Without giving away anything kind of commercially sensitive about your business, what's your sense? Are you going to come screaming out of the gate? Is the work there waiting to be done?
Oh, look, I don't know. I mean, obviously, a lot of because we haven't actually been able to shoot anything, there's been a couple of exceptions to that. People doing some government comms, some of which you may have seen. There was actually sort of some quite nice work done on that level. But I think there'll be a lot of dialogue. I think it will be quite a slow-moving thing to begin with, and I don't think we're going to be racing back to it. And obviously, there's a bit of some clients are going to want to get on with it really quickly, and some clients are going to take a lot more time. And I wouldn't put any judgment on that at this point. We're just trying to facilitate it as best we can. Amy,
how are you finding it at Augusto?
Well, we're holding to shoot, so we've got basically we're doing contingencies based on going to level 2. So I'm holding on a massive project to shoot right now that I don't like the contingency if we don't go to level 2. So we're ready to go using a lot of the stuff that's screen safe, and people have been planning for us around how do you bring talent through when you're shooting, all of those kind of things that we have to be mindful of. But for us, the pipeline is really filled up by shooting, so we're desperate to get back to that shooting. We've pivoted a little bit into a bit of strategy stuff. We've done some pitching. Remote pitching is a whole nother thing. And dialed up a lot of design, but for us, the shooting is the game changer. I mean, that really gets us busy again, and that's what we're poised to do.
That's exactly right, and that's where we want to be in a really strong position with all the producers, and know what the terrain is, and being able to be really efficient about it, and educate agencies and clients really quickly about what we've got to do, and have those creative. We're already having the creative scoping conversations, but people are still talking about scripts that are coming, and we've then got to try and move on all that stuff really efficiently.
I think we've pretty much run it. We've reached peak ads shot by people in their homes on their phones, so we need to move on to the next. I think that was always going to happen. That micro production thing becomes it's effective for comms, but only to a point, and then there's no craft. And weirdly entertaining with the world of television and seeing some of our favorite hosts at home in that environment, even like with the American chat show hosts and things like that. But it's the same on New Zealand shows. It's kind of weirdly entertaining. It's like they've taken you home with them or something. It's kind of intimate.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because we didn't have even paid attention last week from everyone's homes, and it's once you get it up and running, it's actually quite it's a great format to be able to do that kind of thing. And you see an insight to someone else's, personal space, I suppose.
Like your bedroom in your background right now, Jodes.
Not my bedroom, Nigel.
This was one of the observations that we made the other day, right? About meetings with clients and stuff. When they're all sitting there in their t-shirts and their lounges, bedrooms, whatever, it does create for a slightly more personal relationship, doesn't it?
And the kids coming through, cups of tea being dropped off, wine being dropped off.
A new intimacy is in the relationship.
My kids are not dropping off cups of tea or wine. Whatever you got going on over there, Amy.
Dude, you're not training them, Nige.
I need some insight into that.
And they're looking for the next short order of cooking. What's the next course that I'm preparing? As by capacity, a short order chef of the house. I'm good at that. It's been great.
There's some chat. I was just going to say there's some chat in the market about New Zealand coming out early on a global scale out of lockdown and stuff, potentially creating some opportunities for the film industry to shoot internationally or for international markets. Are you
Yeah.
guys seeing any of that?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of calls from the States, a lot of calls from the UK, a lot of calls from other places saying, what does it look like? When are you going to be open? What are the realities of remote shooting? And we've been doing a lot of work on, on bolstering our remote capacity, which is, live Q-Take feeds around the world. And, what kind of data we can manage on location shoots in the South Island, for example. So on the NZAPG, we've had a subcommittee who've just been working on that, on tech, basically, to get all of that really, really in a very good match fit state. So yes, there will definitely be some opportunity. I think the immigration side of things is still on a bit of a go slow, and that will take a little bit of time, but obviously there's some very big shows that are not in production, and they will be keen to get back as soon as possible, and all of those conversations are happening at a government level on a daily basis, I think. So yeah, there'll be some opportunity for sure.
I think the knock-on effect of that is really interesting in terms of if we start producing a lot more, local content, which is what we do anyway, but doing it, showcasing New Zealand, and then that starts to be on-sold to the rest of the world because we've got new, fresh content. Then, that's an interesting spin on the whole tourism piece, right? I know they can't come to New Zealand yet, but I guess you're building up or creating that demand for when we can.
Hey, well, because it was interesting, because I think Damon, you brought up that point last time about, us coming out of the blocks first. Do you think as a CCO and like with the DDB network, do you think there's an opportunity for the agency, for the networks to be looking at their affiliates down here in New Zealand and going, look, can you make some ads for us? And can you,
Yeah, we've already had conversations with other DDB agencies, and they've been asking. So I think, there comes a point where we've got to get back to shooting. And if we're the first country that can shoot, I think you're going to find a lot of people talking to production companies. And I think most of the major networks will have conversations because if you can get something done here, why wouldn't you? So I feel like I said last time, I could see New Zealand being a hub for 6 months before everybody else gets their act together. That might also happen with Australia. And, this Trans-Tasman thing becomes interesting as well in terms of Australian agencies being able to shoot here again. So I feel pretty optimistic about that.
Nice.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Silver lining, all that,
Yeah, glass half full.
But yeah, nice. Yes. So one of the other thing, I think one of the things that the positive things that's come out of this lockdown, especially from the agency point of view, is stepping up and being the problem solvers for our clients, being involved and kind of, I've noticed that a lot of the work we've been doing, we're dealing with more than just the marketing people, like the big bosses are kind of getting interested in the comms. And I just think it feels like we're being asked to solve more and bigger problems than the day-to-day stuff. And I was just wondering if you guys are feeling that some of the ways you've been involved in kind of solving bigger problems, and also whether we think this is something that's going to continue.
Just a bit more context for that before anybody answers. I was talking to one of my peers the other night, the guy that runs the Industry Association in Canada, along with the woman that runs the 4As in the US, and this came up. And one of the points that was raised was that agencies in this environment, certainly in North America, are being asked to do things they haven't been asked to do in a long time. Businesses with problems aren't going to the accountancy firms. They're not going to PwC and Deloitte. They're not going to the tech platforms. They're going to their agency to ask for solutions outside kind of just comms where they would normally have gone. And it's interesting that the conversations aren't just with the CMO, they're with the board and the CEO. And the other interesting point is, as part of these discussions, firstly, there's a real sense of partnership. And secondly, there's not a procurement team in sight. And one of the things we've been talking about as an industry for a long time is how we migrate back up the value chain to get that seat at the table again, to be solving the really big strategic problems. And it feels like there's some of that going on. So to Pete's point, really interested to hear what the agencies are seeing.
Yeah, I would say I mean, what's the old adage? You can't cut your way to growth. You know, I think that the great advantage of advertising agencies, good ones, are they're like Swiss Army knives. And I think they can solve a lot of different problems. And I think what they're really good at is they can do them quickly. So I actually think the speed that, you know, what Paul's talking about is we're now having these meetings with all sorts of people. A lot of it's to do with how quickly you can solve a problem and how quickly you can come up with ideas. And I think there are not a lot of places that can come up with as many ideas as quickly as an advertising agency. So for me, you know, I feel like advertising agencies have always done this. We've always been able to do these things. We don't just do comms, but I think this is a good example or a good time to show what else we can do.
Agree.
Yeah.
And what do you say?
I can give you some specific examples. The area that's going gangbusters, we've got two areas that are going gangbusters for us. One, it's not quite as far as I think you're alluding to, Paul, but community management is one, which has typically been the domain of a client, and that's just gone ballistic. And so they're needing greater expertise and capacity of people to be able to do that sort of stuff and navigate their way through that, because that's an area that just hasn't been quite so prolific in the past until now. So that's one area. And the other one that's just gone obviously off the Richter is e-com. So it's not necessarily an area where we would have just dabbled in the past, but suddenly it's become like a superhero. So we're literally putting together like functional e-commerce. We're not just talking about media deliveries, you know, which is our bread and butter, but we're actually putting together online shops for clients and significant ones, and getting them going. So creating a whole distribution channel for them, like from scratch, and then, you know, marketing them and you know, helping them with some of the back end as well. You know, straight out of the blocks. So that's been an area of opportunity. It's not, I know it's not quite as far as you're sort of like looking to see, but that's certainly a new area, like so much so that we've literally started to market. We've developed products and stuff at all levels, and it's not just big meaty stuff, but also really, to Damon's point, quite down and dirty, socialized versions as well that we can turn on in, like, you know, a couple of days. So,
and I agree. I read the other day that I think online shopping in New Zealand's grown by 30%. So I mean, that pretty much backs up what you're saying, is that everybody's trying to jump onto that. And you think about trying to do that, how quickly you have to do that. Who are you going to go and talk to? So I do feel like that is an opportunity.
OMD.
This is a plug-free environment.
OMDDB. What did you say? OMDDB.
What are you seeing, Amy?
We've had this kind of really interesting mix of, you see some clients turn off really quickly because of the business they're in. For example, you know, Adidas, we deal with global. Suddenly they're calling off their shoots. No one can travel. You can't get to the sports teams. But the food companies have obviously just kept going. And so we're ramping up in those areas. But also one of the things we found is that at the beginning, we actually had some clients who were like, literally, don't talk to us for a little while. We're grappling with such big strategic issues. But because they've established these social channels of just being always on, that are really hungry for content, suddenly you can't turn that off. And so actually they've had to take a different point of view. And I think we saw a couple of people just leave that alone for a couple of weeks and then suddenly go, hang on, now there's a gap in my pipe. So suddenly you're turning back on. And it's that same thing that Damon said. You do go to your agency for some high quality ideas. I mean, getting ideas is never an issue, right? Everyone's got ideas, but you need some really good strategic ideas that can be played out well. And that's when you go to the agency and get it done really quick and really fast. And some clients have just been, great, we're dealing with how do we get staff for our drive-through? Please, you deal with that for us and we'll trust you to get that going. Which is
ideas are like arseholes. Everyone's got one.
And some of them are loud.
But making them, that's another story.
Totally.
Yeah.
So then I guess one of the questions is, if this kind of new working relationship, it's kind of like discovering going on a work conference together, and then how do you keep that glow when things settle down and we're all back to work? Can we maintain that? How do you keep that going? How do we keep being crucial in the conversation and coming up with these solutions? Like, is that something that people think about?
Well, hopefully they're successful, I suppose. It sort of depends on, what the recovery's like, and are these solutions being successful? Is Nigel's pivot into developing e-commerce platforms, is that short-term, or does that create a long-term opportunity? In our space, we're seeing it's pretty much a race to be the expert in consumer away from home behaviour. And I mean, we don't have direct contact with clients per se, but everyone's out there, as Damon says, with their idea and with their opinion on what people are going to be doing at alert level 2, alert level 1. And it's creating a lot of noise. I do wonder how effective that is when the reality is we don't really know. And you might come out with a piece that is beautifully written and makes a lot of sense, and then the next day it's irrelevant because things have changed and taken a pathway that we didn't quite expect. So there's just been so much information coming at all of us. It's just, I think the challenge is really honing in on what's going to make the difference, either sector or definitely by at a client level. And
there's
really
I was going to say, there's so many opinion pieces about how things are going to change.
Oh, so many expert opinions.
Change, what they call it, change porn. But the reality is, and Ritson and these guys are talking about this as well. I don't know if things are going to change as much as we think.
Yeah.
I think there'll be some opportunities, and there'll be some new types of business. I look at things like delivery. I can see that becoming a much bigger idea for a lot of businesses. But I think people will like to get back to normal. I think a lot of people talk about Teams and that and Zoom, and it's great. But I think generally people miss the office. They miss, they miss the interaction. So as much as there's sort of good technological advancements from this, I think people also miss what they had.
I think a great example, even we hear a lot of people talking about the fact, people have learned from the lockdown, you can save so much money by not eating out and going out. Look, people aren't going to be going out as much. I just think, bullshit. The minute the
stop living.
The first thing we did in level 3 was order pizza.
Yeah, and social distancing, schmistancing. You just want to get into the bar and be with your mates and drink. I just think we revert back to our old ways. I think we take on a few things, like maybe Zoom Mum for Mother's Day or something. But it'll be hopefully back to mostly normal, the old normal, not new normal, and stop using the word new normal.
But I think there's normal in day-to-day lives, and I think we will get back to normal quite quickly in terms of how we operate, how we interact. Yes, we'll be doing a bit more of this. I think where the significant change will occur is at a macroeconomic level. The economy will look different, and it will change, I think, quite quickly. We've all got, very dependent on the supply chain out of China, and governments around the world are already starting to look at what we do about that. How do we become less dependent on one economy, and what do we do to bring potentially some manufacturing home? So, what are the critical industries that New Zealand should have on shore? We spent 30 years moving stuff offshore, but I think one of the things we will see at a macroeconomic level is government encourage and incentivize, for example, onshore local manufacturing of some pharmaceuticals, so that we're not as strategically reliant on someone else's supply chain.
Yeah, I think that'll be the next interesting. That there'll be the sort of the localness. Let's just call it. There'll be a lot of that kind of work. I think trying to get the economy up and running. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because the kind of work and the kind of budgets and the kind of work that you'll be making for those quite a lot of national campaigns, I'd imagine. Tourism, travel. That kind of thing. So I can see that being an opportunity, but I do think the economy is going to change fairly radically. And I think it's also interesting as to when, is it the third quarter or the fourth quarter? There'll be maybe this bounce where we get to level 1 and everyone spends some money, and then there might be sort of a pause after that. So I think the real problem with all of this is always timing.
I reckon it's a really fascinating topic, though, in that the world has been on this consumerist path, right? Kind of that, we followed that American model of spend, you know, what is your hobby? It's like going to the mall, going to the shops, going to the cafe, and every business we work with, including our own, is about every year growing your revenue, you know, making sure you're banking enough profit. We're trying to do that with our clients. And actually this is a reset, and, you know, whether it's an old normal or a new, what are we going to value now? Because I actually think this is a really fantastic opportunity to go get off that blind consumer train that we're on and figure out another way to live in this world that doesn't involve growing your profit line and your revenue line by 15% every year. And what do we value?
Yep.
Like Peter's saying, you want to go to the bar. It's not about buying the expensive cocktails. It's about connecting, you know? So how do we use what we do, our ideas and our ability to make people feel things for actually something better than just blindly going, shit, the economy's a mess. How do we get people spending again? I really think this is a great opportunity to reset the world for better. And we should play a part in that.
The interesting corollary of that is you put your sorry, Nick, you're muted. The interesting corollary of that is it's bigger than just people. It's about the planet. You know, one of the things about the last 2 months is we've seen the planet reset. We've seen dolphins in the canals in Venice. You know, we've seen goats and sheep come back into villages all over the world. We've seen bears roaming the streets of cities and towns in Canada. And you know, it's really interesting to think, well, actually, if we cleaned up, it's not as hard as it potentially might look to actually clean the world up and clean our act up as a race or as a species. So I think there's a whole interesting thought there that people are going to want to start to explore as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about when I was mute. It was, it's reconciling it with the climate crisis that grows ever worse, you know, by the hour. So how do we reconcile what's going to be an economic crisis and the capitalism that we're all invested in with, you know, the ticking time bomb that is our planet? And I think the reset point Amy was making, I think it's where it intersects with that thinking and what we're doing about that there's a big opportunity straight away.
Well, it's like everything, right? And we're seeing it even now, the balance between the social and the economic health of the world, right? So we shift too far one way, then something comes out of balance, which it has, and now we're shifting it back, and arguably it might be out of balance now. So just trying to find the happy medium, perhaps.
I think it's interesting what Amy's saying. It's a really interesting question. Will people care about things differently or about different things after this? How long will that last? And then I think the other question is also, what will brands alter their behavior because there's this new reality? Like I'm kind of on the fence on it, because I you know, like we all said, we got to level 3 and we ordered pizza. You know, there's a part of me that goes, I don't know if people will change that much, but there's another part of me that says that you know, the consumerism that you're talking about will feel strange after this. There will be a moment where the world sort of pauses. You know, I think it's that moment where you walk back into work. Do you shake hands? You know, or do you just elbow? Because you know, it all feels a bit odd. So it'll be interesting to see if people take advantage of that, or if it just sort of peters out. I think about the GFC. You know, after the GFC, everybody said the world's changed, and then a year later, it hadn't. So I don't know which way it's going to go. It'll be interesting.
I think the GFC though is vastly different, right? So we're in, you know, a pandemic-induced recession. It's not the same thing, you know, is the point that I keep making. So we're in lockdowns.
Yeah, I'm actually writing a piece at the moment about catastrophes. And if you look at sort of swine flu, you had the Roaring 20s after that. After the Second World War, you had the 50s, which was the most prosperous decade. It's kind of interesting what happens after these things. Now, I know a pandemic is different to a war, but I do think people try very hard to get back to where they were. And that's quite a lot of energy that, that goes into society. And it does feel a little bit like, New Zealand's a bit like a spring at the moment. And it'll be interesting to see when that spring is sort of unleashed, what happens.
But I think as well,
I think there's an element of time as well. Human behaviour doesn't change after 6 weeks in lockdown. If you think about the generations that have changed fundamentally, it was our grandparents or their grandparents that lived through the Great Depression. That was an ongoing crisis that destroyed lives and societies.
It was 10 years long.
For a decade, literally, and that changed the way people thought about everything. The Second World War was the same. It was 6 years, and that changed the way that people that went through it lived and wanted to live. I'm not sure that 6 weeks locked up at home is enough of a reset to do that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily, because I don't want any more time locked up. But yeah,
it's not. You're right, Paul. 6 weeks isn't enough, but it's assuming that we're out of it in 6 weeks. So as we were discussing before, right? If level 2 goes on for months and months and months, as time progresses, if we are working, like Joan said, at 50% or less, I suspect, for months.
And you're right, Nigel. It's like a weird, it's lingering. Like a war ends, whereas I think it'll linger globally, and it'll be over in some places, but it'll still be going in other places. So it's quite interesting to think about how long this goes on for globally versus how long it goes on locally.
Well, I think the financial impact will go on for months and months and months, if not years. So COVID might be the short-lived issue, and the financial impact, it could be 3 years, depending on what some sectors, tourism saying 5 years before it recovers here.
Yeah, I saw. Who's the Oracle of Omaha? He just sold all his shares in airlines.
Warren Buffett, really?
Yeah, Warren Buffett, yeah.
He said he's got rid of all of them. So I don't know if that's a sign.
I would say
he's not wrong very often.
No.
Well, that's the thing. That's a really good example, right? So travel, even going out, let alone coming in. All of this crowd has probably spent a lot of time in a plane. I certainly do. And now I don't expect to be in one for probably months, if not years.
I saw a thing the other day, Assassin's Creed. You can go on virtual tours of Egypt, the game. And, there's a lot of, I can see virtual experiences and the people being prepared to pay for virtual experiences versus real experiences. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things that could come out of this where you can't physically be somewhere.
I think if you look at film distribution, Universal, I think, has just put Trolls out digitally, which is somewhat unprecedented. So it's starting to break the traditional window, which is always theatrical, then secondary, and other revenue cycles after that. It's actually going to change cinema distribution in probably quite a significant way. And there are cinemas here. I noticed the Academy Cinema, which is only a small cinema here. But there's a company in Hamilton which puts big studios and film festivals, all sorts of aggregators of content online, and they're incredibly busy. And I think the nature of the business, it's a very interesting space to watch. Just what studios are going to do is at the end of the traditional theatrical window, or are we just going to go back to it? We're all probably just going to go to a movie.
Bring back
like you were saying before, Damon, it's whether we drive-ins, right? There's another great drives with food. You get to eat.
Oh my God, awesome.
We had that conversation this morning.
There's a great commercial coming up for I can think of a couple of brands. You good with that? But anyway, it's a game changer. It is a game changer for entertainment as well, and the way that that big film sets operate too. It will change that for a very meaningful period of time, and they may not be the same again.
I reckon that theatrical window.
Film with 200 people.
Yeah, I reckon that theatrical window's closed now. I reckon the studios are still kicking and screaming, but I reckon this is it. This is the death knell for that.
Exactly. I mean, Universal's gone, well, we've had to think about it, and actually, you know what, we're going to drop our film digitally, pay $20 for it. we're going to recruit, we're going to wait on James Bond. They've hit pause on quite a bit of stuff, but I think, like you say, it's probably got to the point where it's irreversible in some respects.
And it feels like
going.
It feels like content and distribution. You know, you've got your content companies and your distribution companies. I could see a lot of mergers happening over the next year. If you think about the platform and who's creating the content, because they need each other.
Content and IP, whoever's creating that IP and creating that content is in a really strong position. And the traditional ancillary people, the sales companies, distribution companies, middlemen, less so.
$50
that's probably going to have some change. Yeah. Yeah.
You heard
Why
it
not?
first.
If you had the money, I'm with you.
We should ask Warren
Buffett. Ask Warren Buffett if he wants to join that deal.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you're saying with that's what you're saying with Sky and Vodafone. That was, and even in our own backyard, where they were trying to put together distributors and content. I'll call it makers, and in the sense of sport, right? You know, in New Zealand, and you know, again, I've made this comment about 10 times this week about Comcom and the government, you know, dishing out $50 million bucks in the media industry. Like, well, you know, if they'd approved the mergers in the first place, they wouldn't have needed to.
Totally.
Yeah, I think there's Bauer. I mean, you just what will content and what will platforms look like in New Zealand that are from New Zealand? I think that's a really that's a whole podcast.
Is that another whole topic?
I think so.
Pack that on for next week.
It's interesting. If you look at Neon, I mean, Neon, I think is still merging with Lightbox. Is that right? I don't know that it's happened yet. But I can still see both of them on my television. But Neon's has got some pretty strong programming, and actually, as a Sky branded product, is actually looking really good. And you know, we've all been watching it because we've all been home. And there's definitely opportunities there, you know, for the stuff that has really smart programming like that.
Yeah, well, that's right. They've got access to good content streams, right? So now people are being exposed to it because, again, necessity and mother of invention, etc.
They can't go to a movie. Yeah.
Well, they'll probably want to start streaming this interview series, I would imagine, very soon. You know, multiple
places.
I hear it's radio and TV NZ, Jody.
No comment.
I think we should, a little bit of editing, maybe just 2 days would be good.
Bit of grading.
Bit of hair and makeup.
Paul Henry Vegas.
Hey, look, we'll probably just about time to wrap up for this week. But is there anyone want to leave on a light note? Any fun things happen this week you want to comment about, or anything you're looking forward to next week? Level 2, first thing you're going to do, possibly.
Looking forward to the kids going back to school. That's for sure.
Hearing a lot of that.
Yeah. For their own good.
When I Zoom with friends and I haven't heard their kids after a couple of Zoom meetings, are the kids okay? Are they still around, or locked outside?
Well, what's level 2, right? So if level 3 is level 4 takeaways, is it level 4 takeaways in pubs?
Yeah.
You had me at pubs.
It's all progress. It's all progress.
I'm going to say, smart move their way. When this whole thing started 5 weeks ago and we were told if we'd been told, look, it's me 7 or 8 weeks, I don't think we would have handled it as well, probably.
No.
I think the government's done a superb job in managing our expectations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And breaking it up into little bits for us.
Yeah.
Very clever, I think.
She warms you up every time. Like, I'm going to give you an announcement about the announcement. You know what I mean? It's like, so you never come in cold. You've already got half the story in advance.
Yeah.
She is a master of communications.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Master. Brilliant.
All right. Hey, well, look, thanks everyone for your time again. And, you know, be super next week and keep creating, keep being awesome. And we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye.